Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to another quick tank review. This time we're going to be looking at the Object 430 version 2, a tier 9 Soviet medium tank with a hell of a lot of armor. And this fact is amplified by the rear mounted turret, which allows you to side scrape in an unparalleled fashion. If you're an avid T-54 driver, then you owe it to yourself to have a look at the Object 430 version 2. I'm going to let you know everything that you need to know about this vehicle in this review, and I've got a double helping of gameplay coming right up. And if you have no interest in buying this tank, then I'll hopefully highlight some of the weaknesses for you so you can take them out effectively on the battlefield. So the Object 430 has got 1,700 hit points, that's 50 more than the T-54 immediately, and weighs just over 36 tons when fully equipped, making it slightly heavier by 1 ton. However, the engine power on the tank is a disappointing 580, which is 120 horsepower less than the T-54. Nevertheless, the top speed limit is still a fantastic 55 kilometers an hour, making it one of the faster Tier 9s if it can get up to speed. And its traverse speed is on par at 48 degrees a second, making it quickly able to reposition itself to try and make use of its fantastic frontal armor, which is 120 millimeters at the front, 80 at the side, and 40 at the rear. And the turret is 248 at the front, 185 at the side, and 63 at the rear. Let's take a quick look into What Tank Viewer to look at this in some more detail. So here's our Object 430 version 2. And here is a key with its armor thickness. So the front of the tank is 120 millimeters, including the lower plate. Now the upper plate is fairly well angled, and this will usually be an auto bounce unless they're aiming down on it with good gun depression. The lower plate, while still angled, is slightly flat, and if you poke yourself up over a ridge, this will be an easy target for the enemy. On top of this is a plate of 60 millimeters thickness, but it is so well angled that unless they're above you or artillery is raining upon you, it's going to be an auto bounce. Now the side of the tank has an 80 millimeter plate that's completely flat along the sides, with 55 millimeters below that, which is slightly angled, although that's not going to make too much of a difference. Generally with this tank, you're going to want to angle it like this to be able to make sure that this is an auto bounce down the side while keeping your frontal plate as well angled as possible. Obviously the rear of the tank is a gigantic weak point, which at 40 millimeters is very vulnerable to HE damage, let alone AP ammunition. Now, let's look at the turret of this tank, which is very well armored indeed. There's 248 millimeters at the front, tearing down to 210 above that, with some areas of 185 just above this front-facing machine gun. Now, the tank does have some cupolas, but they're 130 millimeters thick and fairly well angled, and they're quite hard to penetrate. This tank is so low profile, however, that often the enemies will be aiming down upon it, and this makes the cupolas much weaker if they're doing so. There is a weak point on top of the tank, however, that is only 30 millimeters thick, and this is easily penetrated by pretty much any tank the vehicle can meet if they get a good clean shot. However, make sure you avoid shooting this lip of 64 millimeters, which is at the same angle, but as it's over twice as thick, is an auto bounce. Now, firing at the gun of this vehicle is a very tricky thing to penetrate. There is 248 millimeters of spaced armor, and you'd have to have a very high caliber gun and probably be firing some kind of premium ammunition to be able to get through it. Really, what you need to know about the Object 430 version 2 is that its lower plate is actually weaker than the T-54's because of the lack of angling on it. The upper plate functions about the same, but the turret armor, apart from the weak point that we highlighted, is stronger than the T-54, especially the cupolas. But the key advantage is that the rear-mounted turret on this tank allows you to side scrape around corners and not expose your lower plate. You can get to the stage where you've pretty much got an auto bounce on the side of your tank, and you can still shoot your enemy. Whereas with a T-54 to side scrape, you are going to be exposing a lot of your upper plate or your lower plate. And to not do so, you'd have to angle your tank quite a lot, which exposes your side armor. Think of it as the difference between the FV215B and the T110E5 if you have both of those tanks. You'll be happy to know, however, that this tank is very well armed indeed. You get a choice of 100 millimeters, and let's just take a look at both of them. The M63 has a better rate of fire, better accuracy, and much better aim time, but it has 18 millimeters worse penetration. Now, this penetration on the M63, 201 millimeters, is very bad for Tier 9. Many other tanks, such as for example the Centurion 7-1, have got 70 extra millimeters of penetration nearly, while tanks such as the M46 Patton and the E50 have got 17 and 19 millimeters more penetration respectively. That makes this very underwhelming for going through the fronts of enemy vehicles, or at least the more heavily armored Tier 9 and Tier 10 tanks. Now there is a way to compensate for that, and it is going to be the heat shells on this vehicle. They have got a whopping 330 millimeters of penetration, able to get through anything in the game frontally, but they will cost you 4 times as much. And one thing I'd just quickly like to highlight is this is a very expensive tank to run. The standard ammunition cost 1,230, and it only does 320 alpha damage compared to the 105 millimeters of other tanks. That's even more expensive than the 105mm on the Centurion 7-1, and let's not forget that this tank has got some of the highest penetration in the game, and a great accuracy to make your shots count. You will quite often find yourself just wasting your AP shells in this vehicle, firing at many Tier 8, Tier 9 and Tier 10 tanks, and it's often going to be better for you to load that premium shell, not bounce, and guarantee the damage on the enemy tank. If you absolutely don't want to fire heat ammunition, then you probably want to go for the D54. But you're going to be less accurate, and you're going to have a whopping aim time of 2.9 seconds, which is pretty horrendous for a medium vehicle, as well as making your tank half a ton heavier. Now, as the turret on this tank is rear-mounted with practically no weak turret ring visible, that means it has got terrible gun depression. So here we have our Object 430 on the left, the T54 in the middle, and the M46 Patton on the right. We can see that the Object 430's gun depression is 4 degrees. That's 1 degree less than the T54 and 6 degrees worse than the M46 Patton. But it does come with the slight bonus of having the highest DPM on any of the Tier 9 medium tanks. At over 2,500, that's just slightly higher than the Patton, and 64 DPM higher than the T54. Really, this difference is not dramatic though. Apart from that, this tank is pretty normal, packing 390 meters view range with 760 signal range. Now you've had a rundown of this vehicle, let's see how it performs in some gameplay. So here we are playing the Object 430 version 2 in a very nice matchup indeed. We're playing on Erlenberg and we're defending an assault. So, this kind of a matchup is really beneficial for the Object 430 version 2. Although there aren't really any super soft targets on the enemy team, most of their Tier 8s are still packing over 200 millimeters of penetration. In fact, all of their Tier 8s are packing over 200 millimeters of penetration. And of the Tier 9s that we're against, the T30s and the Waffenträger auf Panzer IV really kind of make the armor not so brilliant. The Object 430 version 2 is a tank that when it gets into a very nice matchup indeed, mostly against Tier 7 and Tier 8 targets, there are certain vehicles that just stand almost no chance of penetrating it. So here we have an AMX-12T, who is being fairly brash indeed. You can see the limitations of the gun depression right out. Well, right at the start of that game, we had to reposition ourselves over the ridgeline, and that wasn't really a prominent ridge to be able to shoot that AMX-12T. You really will struggle with this tank. And a map such as Erlenberg, which really favors quite a lot of gun depression, can be very frustrating to play indeed. So you might have been able to see that we're not the slowest of vehicles. We're able to get into position quite quickly. Obviously not as quickly as a T54 would be able to do, having that 100 horsepower extra on its engine. But that definitely doesn't mean that the Object 430 is sluggish. It kind of performs in the same way as the Object 140 and the T62A, which while they might look like they have rather poor performing engines, the ground resistance boosts seem to compensate. Well, that's one T30 that we're not going to have to worry about. He got absolutely obliterated by this gigantic tank destroyer gun line behind us. So that's why I'm trying to push forwards. To try and get some eyes up on my opponents. But I'm still very afraid indeed of all of the tank destroyers on the enemy team. They've still got 7 left. So we take our time to confirm a tracking shot there into the IS-8. Now a great rate of fire allows us to fire twice. And that's something you've got to consider with the 100mm on the Soviet Tier 9 tanks. So we managed to side scrape backwards to be able to work the ridgeline and get a shot on the T-30. And now I decide it's best to close the distance with this tank, considering he just fired. I'm banking on the fact that he's got a 155mm and a terrible reload rate. So we managed to get around his side. And from here, there's nothing that that lumbering tank destroyer can do. So, the other flank has had a really bad time indeed. It looks like we've loaded this flank. A T-30 has died, but it looks like that was the only Tier 9 defending. And well played to the enemy team. They've absolutely ripped through us. But thankfully, the cap circle on Erlenberg Assault when you're defending is on this side. So they're going to have to also push over the bridge. And that's why I'm racing back to be able to get into position to defend the cap. So as you can see here, the Object 430 version 2 is chugging along at over 50 kilometers an hour. Which makes tanks such as the Centurion 7-1 look very sluggish indeed. Even though it doesn't have the best horsepower, it's still able to get around. So we put a nice shot there into the side of that E-50 turret. We look for another one. But I really don't want to shoot the E-50. I feel like it's a wasted shot until he turns his turret to the side. The pattern bounces off us as we side scrape, and we put a good return fire into him. Now we're trying to hunt this E-50. Right in the side. You've got to really wait for your shots with this tank with 200mm of penetration. I tried to fire clutch there. We were unable to hit the Foch. And this is a very stressful situation going on. Now I don't want to be too aggressive because it's very likely the enemy have got tank destroyers that are located around this area here. Oh, I aimed that one just slightly too high. And it hits the E-50's gun barrel rather than the Foch. But the rate of fire on this tank is so great that we're able to put in another one very quickly afterwards. So this SDA-1 and the M46 pattern are coming around the corner, and unfortunately, the Jagdpanther 2 has died in a location to back up the SDA-1. We tried to fire one at him, but thankfully we're getting quite a lot of fire support from the ridgeline from a Waffenträger Alf Panzer IV who's managed to pick up 3 kills. So you saw our armor held up well there against a Jagdpanther 2, and we're able to put a returning shot into him. So this is a part of the battle where I probably lose the game with passive play. I am still terrified that they have tank destroyers over here, and so I'm not attacking. They've got a Waffenträger Alf Panzer IV who has not been spotted yet. And I'm still feeling that he must be around the corner, but I can't wait anymore. I've got to help that Super Pershing. We take a big shot from the Jagdpanther 2, but I know I'll reload first. So I come and give him one. Keep my eyes about me and see that the Ferdinand's about to take out the Waffenträger Alf Panzer IV, and so I decide to rush back and try and help him. He's picked up 4 kills, I've picked up 4 kills, and at the time I thought, oh, I need to help that guy out. But the Ferdinand manages to push through and remove the covering fire that we had. And this situation is starting to look very grave indeed. I've been reduced to just over 1,000 hit points, and that Super Pershing, who's still holding the bridge, is on next to no hit points. And the enemy Waffenträger auf Panzer IV still hasn't been spotted. At the time when I was playing this game, I was sure that he must be towards where the Pershing was, and there he finally appears. I spent ages being passive near the cap circle because I didn't know where he was. He suddenly appears at the worst possible time. Now my Super Pershing dies, and now there's no one looking after the cap. There's also a T-28 prototype who's got 4 kills, who surely must be in that position where I thought the Waffenträger was. So now I have loaded some heat rounds. I felt like I really wanted to make my shots count. I couldn't afford a single bounce here. And they need to cap. They've got a 1 minute 30, and if I can stop them from capping out, we win the game. Ferdinand comes over, we put a shot into him, we try to avoid his ram and get to the side of the Waffenträger auf Panzer IV. We put one more shot into the Ferdinand and we get hit in the side by the T-28 prototype. I repair the gun and I want to side scrape. You're seeing how good the low profile nature is here of this tank, and I was able to avoid the Waffenträger auf Panzer IV for so long. That allows us to take out the Ferdinand, and I tried to close the distance with the Waffenträger auf Panzer IV. We wiggle to avoid another one of his shots, and we try to make the interrupting shot on the Jagdpanther. We were unable to do so. Our armor held up remarkably well there, and you can see just how heavily armored the Object 430 version 2 is. You could also see how great it is to be so low profile that this Waffenträger was unable to shoot us for so long. We got killed by the T-28 prototype, who had not been spotted the entire game, who at the time was in the cap circle. In retrospect, I'm not sure if there's a different way that I could handle this game. I thought I went down swinging, and considering the remaining time on the cap and that the T-28 was indeed over here and came down to help the Jagdpanther, there was very little that I could do without a lot of luck. So even though we lost, we managed to get a huge amount of experience due to our high caliber medal. We got 1,236 base experience, more than anyone on the enemy team got. We picked up 5 kills, and we took 4,385 potential damage before we went down, receiving over 14 hits in that game from mostly high caliber tanks, apart from the AMX-12T at the beginning. Well played to the enemy team for such a successful and devastating attack down the western flank. After that, realizing that they could just surround us by taking the other flank as well, and then digging us out of a strong defensive position. Hopefully this game showed you some of the performance of this 100mm on the Object 430 version 2, and just how resilient this tank can be in a stressful situation. Anyway, that's quite enough. Let's take a look at some more gameplay. So now I'm playing with Ike and Z, and we are assaulting on San River. This is a completely middle of the road matchup for the Object 430 version 2, and I am going to be very aggressive indeed at the start of the game to try and get eyes for my team. This is the best way I feel to play this map, if you're in a tank that can go over 50 kilometers an hour. I personally feel that this ridgeline over here for their medium tanks is very strong indeed. And trying to work the mid-ridge is only a good idea if they don't have such quality players as this SDB-1 and this Leopard, who are going to punish people in the side. Luckily, we managed to get into position without getting spotted. And we're so close to the enemy now that the artillery is not going to be able to punish us. But we're going to be able to spot a back chat at the back. You're not going to be sniping up there, my friend. And that's one of the best things about this position. So we bounce one off the Aufklärungspanzer. We're unable to get him. So I've decided that I'm going to take those buildings down. So as I was mentioning, by going into this position, you stop people from camping up at this position up here, which is very strong indeed. Unfortunately for us, Ike has already been taken out by an E-75, and I have no idea how that one missed. So far, we fired a lot and achieved very little. Hey! But we just removed that tier 7 German light tank's head through a building. What a great shot that was. First it giveth, then it taketh away with this gun. Well, first it taketh, then it giveth. And now we are just going to town on this bat chap. There's simply nothing that he can do. Apart from hide behind buildings. Now this is a very expensive way to remove buildings. 1,250 credits I think a shot with the AP rounds on this gun. But thankfully this tank gets a lot of ammunition, more than enough to be able to carry the vast majority of tier 9 games. Not until you go up onto the tier 10 tanks, such as the T62A and the Object 140, where you really feel that your ammunition is a limited resource. Especially so when at tier 10 all of the tanks have got so much more hit points. So we're still trying to hunt this bat chap and provide eyes for our team from this position. This replay will hopefully give you an idea of the performance of this 100mm, even when it only has 200mm of penetration. So I'm kind of worried about this E75 on the opposite ridgeline to me. If he comes over, it's going to be quite tricky to deal with him. But in the meantime, we finally managed to find our shot on that Carnarvon. Oh, disastrous. That bat chat is more like a bat cat with 9 lives at the moment. Maybe I'm just aiming very badly indeed. Yep. I think I'm just aiming very badly indeed. But finally he gets brought down by an SU-101. So we've used up over 40% of our time. Good kill there by the M103. We would have been able to secure a hit on him if he hadn't. So I've decided that enough is enough. It's time to put this tank to what it's good for. And that is all-round armor, great rate of fire, and aggressive maneuvers. I don't really want to ram that guy full on. What I want to do is get myself into a position where I can use the E25 to go hull down. And one thing I only just forgot to mention is that the turret on this tank can't go the whole way round. It can only turn 180 degrees to the left. Well, it can turn 90 degrees to the left and 90 degrees to the right. But more about that in a sec. We've got a very stressful situation here, but as I'm hiding my lower plate, my armor is absolutely fantastic. This is a perfect situation for the E25. I'm hull down, the enemies can't do anything against us. So I decide to load a heat round, because otherwise we would be unable to get the E75 there. We just absolutely blitzed that situation. Went in, confirmed 2 kills, 3 kills, and also put in a couple of good shots into the AT-15. And what an assault there. Me, that SU-101, and the LTTB really managed to pull it off. Oh god! The artillery puts in a nice shot, but we managed to take him down. Shout out to the SU-101, he probably saved my life there. But we're up to 4,000 damage now and 5 kills, and there are still 5 remaining enemy tanks. Look at all these medium tanks sweeping along the southern part of this map to try and surround the enemy's southeasterly position. That's another bad shot. That one was better. Now we're trying to pressure this lightly armored German medium tank from as long range as possible. Fired clutch in there to hopefully hit the Leopard, but we were unable to do so. But he's come back for some more. And I don't know about you guys, but every time I shoot a Leopard 1, I'm just praying for an ammo rack. Ever since I did that video highlighting the ammo rack changes, where we had all those mouse shooting Leopards and Leopards shooting mouse tanks, every time I just pray for an ammo rack on a Leopard, because I know how susceptible they are to them. So we fire one on the move with almost pinpoint accuracy, bouncing off the Carnarvon. We stop for a second. We don't know if the T-57 Heavy will turn around and engage us, but he is surrounded. We fire on the move again, something that the Soviet medium tanks are very good for. Now we track the T-57 Heavy, who's still focused on trying to kill the Tier 10 tanks to the front of him, which allows us to chew him up. I decide that I want the ram kill, so I secure it and turn around to engage the Carnarvon. Now this is another thing that you can do in the 430 is face hug. It's very hard for him to make meaningful shots on us, but he puts a good one into our cupola there. And remember what I was talking about earlier about our cupolas, that the enemy tanks are taller than you, and if they're taller than you, then they reduce the angling on your cupolas, which make them still susceptible, or shall I say more susceptible to fire. Nevertheless, we finish the game in style with an absolute blitzkrieg, taking 2 kills off the T-57 Heavy and the Carnarvon. And as I just briefly mentioned earlier, but I will have to say I forgot in the garage, the Object 430 version 2 can only turn its turret 90 degrees to the left and 90 degrees at the right. And that made the situation that we had over here all the more awkward. If I'd been in, for example, a T-54, I would have simply rushed, gone hold down on the E-75, turned my turret around, and shot that 416. I had to effectively try and get behind the 416 to keep my frontal armor to the AT-15A and the E-75 to allow me to continue to shoot him, which is something you definitely have to watch out for in this vehicle. Hopefully this game highlighted some of the strengths and the weaknesses of the 430 version 2, but we end up with an absolute cracking result. This was over 5,000 experience for our double. We got the Kamikaze medal for the ram on the T-57 Heavy, a steel wall, high caliber, and the Top Gun. We did just under 7,000 damage, and you can see just how badly we aimed that game, hitting under 75% of our shots, and of those only 23 penetrated, which means that we spent a horrendous amount of money on ammunition. Our armor held up pretty well. We had 2,730 potential damage received with over 12 hits taken. We also did a bit of scouting, receiving 1,286 damage upon detecting. All in all, this was a monstrous game for this vehicle, and we were able to achieve over 2.5 times any of the damage that our Tier 10s were, receiving over 1,700 base experience. Now, I definitely didn't play this game perfectly, but hopefully it still gave you an idea of the tank. So games such as these have allowed me to achieve fairly respectable stats in the Object 430 version 2. In fact, for some reason it's my highest experience medium tank at Tier 9 in the game, with 1,135 average experience and over 60% wins. I've been doing okay in this Tier 9 Soviet medium tank. One thing I will highlight is I do less average damage in the Object 430 version 2 than I did in the Type 61. But there is a huge difference between the amount of assistance damage that you can do in the 430 version 2. I get, on average, 717 average damage caused with your assistance per game in the Type 61, whereas in the 430 version 2 it's over 1,000. And that's because you have the armor to be aggressive. You can put yourself in forward positions and take risks spotting the enemy, knowing that hopefully your turret armor is going to be able to hold up. Something you can't do in many of the other Tier 9 medium tanks. So all in all, I really love this vehicle, but I do feel like it's too similar to the T-54 to warrant me keeping it. I'm going to retire this tank and pick up an Object 430 and see how that fares, and keep the T-54 as my go-to tank for Soviet Tier 9 medium brawling. Now you're probably going to ask, now why is that? Why would you take the T-54 over the Object 430 version 2? Well, personally for me, I prefer the extra degree of gun depression. I like the fact that the frontal armor, in my opinion, is all round better, and the only real sacrifice you make is the turret armor, but I'll more than do that to gain the increased engine performance and the ability to turn my turret the whole way round. You can't shoot at tanks when you're running away from them in the Object 430 version 2, but maybe that is the motto of this tank: get stuck in and never back down. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider giving it a like down below. It really helps the channel out and I'll appreciate it. And if you want to see more Object 430 version 2 gameplay, then click up here and I've got a Pools medal in this tank for you. I'm really interested to know what you think about the Object 432, specifically in comparison to the T-54. Please let me know in the comments what you think about these two Tier 9 Soviet medium tanks. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.